Welcome to Poirot Stories. I'm Preston Flint. Pull up a chair, grab a cup of tea, and let's dive into another classic mystery in the style of the incomparable Agatha Christie. Today, we're unraveling Hercule Poirot and the ancient manor curse. This is a long one, folks. Over 90 minutes of twists, turns, and that signature Poirot brilliance. Perfect for a relaxing evening or a long drive. Tell me in the comments where you're listening from. London, the countryside, or perhaps somewhere exotic like the Orient Express itself. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell for more tales of intrigue. Now, settle in as we begin. Chapter 1. The invitation to Shadowbrook Manor. The autumn of 1925 had draped London in a shroud of amber fog. From the high windows of Whitehaven mansions, the Thames was little more than a pewter ribbon, its barges ghostly shapes that drifted in and out of sight like memories half-remembered. Inside flat 203, Hercule Poirot stood before his mirror, adjusting the precise angle of his bow tie with the solemnity of a priest preparing the Eucharist. The little Belgian detective was, as ever, a vision of order, patent leather shoes gleaming like black mirrors, trousers pressed to a knife edge, waistcoat buttons aligned with military exactitude. Only the famous moustache, two perfect crescents of waxed ebony, betrayed a hint of vanity, for Poirot believed that a well-groomed moustache was the outward sign of an orderly mind. Captain Arthur Hastings, sprawled in the adjacent armchair with the Times spread across his knees, watched his friend with fond exasperation. Really, Poirot, you'd think you were dressing for an audience with the king, not answering a telegram from some country squire. Poirot did not look away from the glass. Mon cher Hastings, one must always be correct. The English, they respect correctness above all things, except, perhaps, a good murder. He permitted himself a small, satisfied smile. And murder, I suspect, is precisely what awaits us at Shadowbrook Manor. The telegram lay open on the occasional table, its yellow paper crisp beneath Poirot's manicured fingers. It had arrived an hour earlier, delivered by a boy whose cheeks were flushed from cycling through the fog. Hastings folded his newspaper with a rustle. Curse? Sounds like a music hall melodrama. Probably some old codger frightened by rats in the wainscot. Poirot's green eyes gleamed. Rats, Hastings? No. Rats do not send telegrams. Rats do not book first-class compartments on the 3 o'clock to Salisbury. No, this is a matter for the little grey cells. He tapped his temple delicately. And the little grey cells, they are, how do you say, titillated. By 2:30, the two friends were installed in a first-class carriage of the West of England Express. The train exhaled great plumes of steam that mingled with the fog, and the platform at Victoria Station dissolved behind them like a watercolour left in the rain. Poirot arranged his travelling rug across his knees with geometric precision, then produced a small leather notebook and began to jot observations in his neat, continental hand. Hastings peered over his shoulder. "What are you writing, old chap?" "Impressions, mon ami. First, Sir Reginald Hargrove is a man of wealth. See the quality of the telegram paper, the prepaid reply. Second, he is a man of education. Note the Latin phrase memento mori embossed beneath the crest. Third, he is a man in fear. Observe the tremor in the handwriting, the blot where the pen hesitated. Fear, Hastings, is the most revealing of all emotions. The journey southwest took them through a landscape softening into autumnal gold. Hawthorn hedges blazed scarlet, rooks wheeled above stubble fields, church spires pricked the horizon like needles in a vast patchwork quilt. Poirot gazed out with the absorbed concentration of a connoisseur studying a painting, while Hastings dozed, lulled by the rhythmic clatter of the wheels. At Salisbury, a liveried chauffeur awaited them beside a silver-grey Rolls-Royce Phantom. The man touched his cap. "Mr. Poirot, Captain Hastings, Sir Reginald's compliments. The motor's this way." The drive to Shadowbrook took 40 minutes along lanes so narrow that the hedges scraped the paintwork. The fog had lifted, but a low mist still clung to the hollows, and the sun hung like a tarnished coin above the downs. Poirot noted the details with relish. The ancient milestone half buried in moss, the abandoned toll house with its broken gate, the solitary magpie that hopped along the verge, one for sorrow. At last the manor revealed itself. Shadowbrook rose from a slight eminence like a dark ship riding a green swell. Tudor in origin, it had been added to by successive generations until it resembled a stone patchwork of gables, chimneys, and mullioned windows. Ivy, thick as a sailor's rope, clung to the walls, its leaves the colour of dried blood. Gargoyles leered from the eaves, their stone eroded into grotesque smiles. The drive curved between yew trees, clipped into severe geometric shapes, and gravel crunched beneath the Rolls' tyres like the breaking of tiny bone. The front door, oak studded with iron nails the size of a man's thumb, swung open before the chauffeur could knock. Sir Reginald Hargrove stood upon the threshold, tall and gaunt, dressed in a tweed suit that hung loosely upon his frame. His hair was iron grey, his nose aquiline, his eyes the pale blue of winter skies. Yet for all his aristocratic bearing, there was something hunted about him, like a stag that hears the distant baying of hounds. "Monsieur Poirot," he said, extending a hand that trembled ever so slightly. "You cannot know what your presence means. And Captain Hastings, welcome. Come in, before the damp claims you." The entrance hall was a cavern of shadows. A suit of armour stood sentinel to the left, its visor raised to reveal empty darkness within. To the right, a grandfather clock ticked with the solemnity of a judge pronouncing sentence. Above the staircase, a stained-glass window depicted the martyrdom of St. Sebastian, the coloured light falling across the checkered floor in pools of crimson and gold. The air smelled of beeswax, wood smoke, and something older, centuries of candle grease and secrets. Sir Reginald led them through an archway into the drawing-room. A fire roared in a grate large enough to roast an ox, yet the warmth barely touched the chill that seemed to emanate from the very stones. Portraits of long-dead Hargroves glared down from panelled walls. A cavalier with a lace collar, a Regency buck with dissipated eyes. A Victorian matriarch clutching a fan like a weapon. "Sherry?" Sir Reginald offered, pouring amber liquid into crystal glasses with a hand that had steadied itself through sheer will. "Or brandy? The cellars here are older than the house itself." Poirot accepted sherry. Hastings, brandy. As they sipped, the door opened again, and the remaining guests entered in a rustle of silk and tweed. First came Lady Evelyn Hargrove, Sir Reginald's wife. She was perhaps 40, though grief and worry had etched finer lines around her eyes than years alone could account for. Her gown was midnight blue, severe yet elegant, and a single string of pearls glowed against her throat. She greeted the newcomers with a smile that did not reach her eyes. Next, Master Geoffrey Hargrove, the only son. 25, tall, athletic, with his father's hawkish nose, but none of his gravity. His evening clothes were fashionably rumpled, his fair hair tousled as if he had just stepped off a tennis court. He shook Poirot's hand with the enthusiasm of a puppy. "Heard all about you, sir. Solved the Orient Express business, didn't you? Capital! Miss Clara Beaumont, Geoffrey's fiancée, followed on his arm. An American heiress whose father owned half the steel mills in Pittsburgh, she brought with her the bright confidence of the New World. Her gown was Parisian, her laugh infectious, yet Poirot noted the way her fingers tightened on Geoffrey's sleeve when Sir Reginald mentioned the curse. Dr. Elias Thorne, the family physician, was a portly man with a watch chain that strained across his waistcoat. His spectacles flashed in the firelight as he nodded greetings, but his left eye twitched with a nervous tic whenever the conversation turned to illness or death. Reverend Silas Blackwood, the local vicar, entered last. Tall and ascetic, with a voice like dark honey, he carried a small leather-bound Bible, as other men carry cigars. His clerical collar seemed too tight for his throat, and his fingers worried at the pages as if seeking comfort in Scripture. Finally, Mr. Victor Langford, Sir Reginald's business partner. A city man through and through, with a bowler hat that he refused to surrender even indoors, and a moustache that aspired to Poirot's, but fell short in both wax and discipline. His eyes were small and sharp, like a ferret's. When all were assembled, Sir Reginald set down his glass with a click that silenced the room. "I suppose," he began, "you are wondering why I have summoned the greatest detective in Europe to a mouldering pile in Wiltshire." His laugh was brittle. "The truth is, I'm afraid. Afraid for my life, afraid for my family, afraid of something I cannot name." He crossed to a tapestry depicting a hunting scene and drew it aside, revealing a small iron safe set into the wall. "This manor has been in my family since the reign of Elizabeth. In 1645, during the Civil War, my ancestress Lady Arabella Hargrove was betrayed by her royalist kin for loving a parliamentarian. They walled her up alive in a secret chamber, along with the family diamonds, worth a king's ransom even then. Her dying curse was that any Hargrove who sought the jewels would meet a terrible end." He turned to face them, his shadow long upon the Turkey carpet. "3 weeks ago, I began searching for that chamber. The estate is bankrupt. Debts, death duties, Geoffreys, indiscretions." He glanced at his son, who flushed. "The diamonds are our salvation. But since I began the search, strange things have happened. Footsteps in empty corridors. A woman's face at windows where no woman stands. Notes left on my pillow, written in a hand I do not recognize. The grey lady walks. Greed begets death." Lady Evelyn made a small sound, half sob, half laugh. "Reginald, you will frighten our guests." "Better frightened than dead, my dear." Poirot set down his glass. "Sir Reginald, you believe this grey lady to be supernatural?" The baronet hesitated. "I am a rational man. Yet twice I have seen her. A figure in grey, drifting through the long gallery at midnight. And last night," his voice dropped to a whisper, "last night, the dagger that hangs above my study fireplace, the one taken from a Spanish grandee at the Battle of Lepanto, was found on my desk, point down, embedded in a map of the manor's foundations." Hastings shifted uncomfortably. "Coincidence, surely? Some servant with a taste for the dramatic?" "Perhaps," Poirot murmured. "Or perhaps someone who wishes Sir Reginald to believe in curses. Tell me, monsieur, have you enemies?" Sir Reginald's laugh was bitter. "Only my banker, my son's creditors, and half the county." Dinner was announced then, a reprieve from the tension. The dining room was a cathedral of oak and silver, lit by a chandelier that had once graced Versailles. The table groaned beneath the weight of game pie, roast pheasant, and a baron of beef that glistened rosy pink. Yet the conversation was stilted. Geoffrey drank too much claret and boasted of motor races at Brooklands. Clara chattered about jazz clubs in New York. Dr. Thorne spoke of new treatments for nervous disorders. The Reverend quoted Proverbs on the perils of covetousness. Langford muttered about share prices. Lady Evelyn picked at her food, her gaze distant. Poirot observed it all, his little grey cells cataloguing every glance, every tremor of a hand, every too-quick laugh. When the ladies withdrew and the gentlemen lit cigars, Sir Reginald drew Poirot aside. "There is more," he confided. "Tomorrow I intend to break through into what I believe is the sealed chamber. If the diamonds are there, the curse be damned, but I fear I will not live to see sunrise." Poirot patted his arm. "Courage, Sir Reginald. Hercule Poirot is here. No curse, real or manufactured, shall prevail against order and method." Upstairs, the guest bedrooms were a warren of corridors and unexpected steps. Poirot's room overlooked the rose garden, now a tangle of thorns silvered by moonlight. Hastings's adjoined it, separated by a connecting door. As the house settled into silence, Poirot stood at his window, watching the mist curl around the statues like ghostly veils. Somewhere in the distance, a clock struck 11, then 12, then 1. At 2 o'clock precisely, a scream shattered the stillness, a high, tearing sound that seemed to come from the very bones of the manor. Poirot was already reaching for his dressing gown as Hastings burst in, hair wild, revolver in hand. "Poirot! That was Sir Reginald's study," Poirot finished grimly. "Come, mon ami. The game, as your English say, is afoot." But that, my friends, is where Chapter 1 ends, on the very threshold of murder. The door to Sir Reginald's study is locked from the inside. The dagger is buried in his back, and the curse of Shadowbrook Manor has claimed its first victim. Or has it? Stick with me for Chapter 2, where the impossible crime will be discovered in all its chilling detail. Until then, this is Preston Flint, reminding you to keep your little grey cells sharp. Good night, and sweet dreams if you dare. Chapter 2. The Crime Discovered. The scream tore through Shadowbrook at precisely 2 o'clock, high and ragged, the sound a woman makes when the world tilts. Poirot was already in his dressing gown, silk, monogrammed, the colour of midnight, when Hastings burst through the connecting door, revolver gleaming. They met the others on the landing in a tableau of candlelight and terror. Lady Evelyn clutched a wrapper to her throat. Geoffrey, barefoot in pyjamas, looked suddenly 12. Clara Beaumont's candle trembled so violently that wax spattered the runner like blood. Dr. Thorne lumbered behind, nightshirt half-tucked, medical bag banging his knee. Reverend Blackwood's lips moved in Latin. Victor Langford brought up the rear, bowler hat absurdly in place, a Webley in his fist. The study door stood at the corridor's end, solid oak, iron-bound, the brass key glinting in the lock on the inside. Hastings rattled the handle. It refused to yield. Through the keyhole, they glimpsed a slice of horror. The desk, the pool of lamplight, and Sir Reginald Hargrove face down across his papers. The Lepanto dagger buried to its ruby hilt between his shoulder blades. Geoffrey threw his shoulder against the door. Once, twice, on the third impact with Langford's help, the lock splintered and the door swung inward on shrieking hinges. Sir Reginald lay as they had seen him, arms flung wide, blood soaking the Persian rug in a dark spreading rose. A single sheet of vellum lay beneath his cheek, the ink still wet. Dr. Thorne dropped to his knees, fingers fumbling for the carotid. Dead! Less than 30 minutes. The blade severed the aorta. Instantaneous. Poirot stepped forward, careful to avoid the blood. Observe, mes amis. Windows barred from the inside, iron intact. Chimney too narrow for a child. Door locked, key inside, no scratches on the escutcheon. And yet, he bent examining the key with a pocket lens. No fingerprints, but Sir Reginald's own. The murderer wore gloves, or wiped the key. Hastings swallowed. But that's impossible, Poirot. Exactly, mon ami, and therefore fascinating. Lady Evelyn swayed. Clara caught her. Geoffrey stared at his father's corpse as though it belonged to a stranger. Langford's revolver hand trembled, then steadied. The Reverend began the commendation for the dying, voice cracking over the Latin. Poirot raised a hand. Silence, if you please. The dead require justice, not prayers yet. He turned to Thorn. Time of death. Between 1:30 and 2. Rigour has not begun. Poirot nodded. The scream at 2, therefore the murderer struck, locked the door and vanished. He moved to the desk. Papers lay scattered. Architectural plans, a ledger of debts, a crude map marked with crosses. The wall safe stood open, empty. Robbery? Langford muttered. Or the appearance of robbery, Poirot replied. He lifted the vellum note with tweezers from Thorn's bag. The hand is spidery, archaic, yet the ink is from the bottle on the desk. Curious. Footsteps echoed. Inspector Japp, roused from the village inn, arriving with 2 constables and the police surgeon. Japp's bulldog face was sour. Poirot, you blessed nuisance. Another locked room. Alas, Inspector, murder is inconsiderate of sleeping hours. While the police photographed and measured, Poirot requested the household assemble in the drawing room. Gas lamps hissed, casting pools of sickly light across the Turkey carpet. A fire had been laid but not lit. The air tasted of coal dust and fear. Poirot took the central chair. Now, mesdames et messieurs, we begin with alibis. Captain Hastings and I were together. Who else? Geoffrey spoke first. In my room, reading, alone. Clara's chin lifted. With Geoffrey until 1:30. We quarrelled. I returned to my room. The maid saw me. Lady Evelyn's voice was a thread. Sleeping draught. At midnight. Dr. Thorne's prescription. Thorne nodded. Digitalis and bromide. She would have been unconscious. Langford snorted. Billiard room. Practising shots. Butler brought whiskey at 1:15. Alone after. Reverend Blackwood closed his Bible. Praying in the chapel. I have a key. Remained until the commotion. Poirot's gaze lingered. Bon. Now, motives. Sir Reginald spoke of ruin. Who benefits? Geoffrey flushed. I inherit, such as it is. Clara added quietly. My dowry would clear the debts. Langford cleared his throat. Reginald threatened to expose irregularities in our Rhodesian venture. Lady Evelyn twisted her pearls. He changed his will. If the diamonds were not found, I receive only a jointure. Thorne removed his spectacles. He consulted me about angina. I warned him stress could kill. The Reverend's knuckles whitened. He planned to sell church land. I begged him to reconsider. Poirot steepled his fingers. Greed, fear, piety, love, hate. The classic ingredients. He rose. But first, the curse. Reverend, the legend. Blackwood opened his Bible. Lady Arabella, 1645, walled up with the diamonds for loving a Roundhead. Her curse, let every Hargrove who seeks my treasure die by steel and shadow. Clara shivered. I heard moans 3 nights ago. Wind, Geoffrey scoffed, but his voice lacked conviction. Poirot's eyes narrowed. The northwest turret, above this room? He crossed to a window. The turret loomed, blind windows staring. We search at dawn. Japp entered, wiping his hands. No secret doors in the study, Poirot. Solid stone. But we found this. He held up a torn scrap of grey silk, snagged on the window bars outside. Someone climbed the ivy? Possible, Poirot said. But the bars are intact, and the drop is 30 feet. Dawn bled across the sky. the colour of watered blood. The household dispersed. Numb, Poirot lingered, studying the map. A cross marked the turret, another fainter beneath the mausoleum. "Hastings," he said softly, "the curse is a mask. Beneath it lies greed, and greed leaves footprints." Outside, the magpie returned, one for sorrow, but at Shadowbrook, sorrow had only begun. And there we pause, mes amis, locked in with the impossible. Chapter 3 will unveil the legend, tighten the alibis, and set the little grey cells ablaze. Until then, this is Preston Flint, whispering from the corridor. Check your locks, trust no shadow, and keep your candle burning. Good night, or what passes for it. Chapter 3. The Legend Unveiled. The scream had barely died when the house erupted into motion. Doors slammed along the upper gallery like gunshots. Bare feet slapped on oak. A woman's sob fractured the silence. Poirot and Hastings reached the main staircase at the same moment as the others, converging in a frantic knot beneath the stained-glass martyr. Candle flames guttered in, the draught throwing St. Sebastian's arrows across their faces in lurid crimson. Lady Evelyn arrived first, clutching a silk wrapper the colour of spilled claret. Her hair had come unpinned and hung in auburn ropes over her shoulders. "Reginald!" she cried, voice cracking like thin ice. Geoffrey was half a step behind, barefoot in pyjama trousers, eyes wild. Clara Beaumont followed, candle held high, the flame trembling so violently that wax spattered the runner. Dr. Thorne lumbered in next, nightshirt tucked into trousers, medical bag banging against his thigh. Reverend Blackwood's lips moved in silent prayer, Bible pressed to his chest like a breastplate. Victor Langford brought up the rear, bowler hat absurdly in place, revolver glinting in his fist. "His study," Poirot said calmly, already descending. "Quickly, but do not touch the door." The study lay at the end of the west corridor, a heavy oak panel bound with iron. A brass key protruded from the lock on the inside. Hastings rattled the handle. It refused to yield. Through the keyhole, they glimpsed a sliver of the room. The edge of the desk, a pool of lamplight, and something dark spreading across the Persian rug like spilled ink. Geoffrey threw his shoulder against the door. Once, twice. Wood groaned. Langford joined him, grunting. On the third impact, the lock splintered, and the door swung inward, hinges shrieking. Sir Reginald Hargrove lay face down across his desk, arms flung wide as though embracing some invisible lover. The antique dagger, the Lepanto blade he had spoken of at dinner, protruded from between his shoulder blades, its ruby pommel catching the lamplight like a drop of frozen blood. A single sheet of vellum lay beneath his cheek, the ink still wet. Dr. Thorne dropped to his knees, fingers fumbling for the carotid. "Dead," he pronounced, voice hollow. "Less than an hour. The blade severed the aorta. Death would have been instantaneous." Poirot stepped forward, careful not to disturb the pooling blood. "Observe, mes amis. The windows are barred. Iron from the outside, no sign of tampering. The chimney is too narrow for a cat. The door was locked from within, the key still in place. And yet—" He bent, examining the keyhole. "No scratch marks, no wax impression. The lock is old but undamaged." He straightened, eyes glittering. "We have, then, the classic crime impossible." Hastings swallowed. "But well, it's impossible, Poirot." "Exactly, mon ami, and therefore fascinating." Lady Evelyn swayed. Clara caught her before she fell. Geoffrey stared at his father's corpse as though it were a stranger's. Langford's revolver hand trembled, then steadied. The Reverend began to intone the commendation for the dying, voice trembling over the Latin. Poirot raised a hand. "Silence, if you please. The dead do not require prayers yet. They require justice." He turned to Thorne. "Doctor, The time of death? Between 1:30 and 2, I'd say. Rigour has not begun. Poirot nodded, and the scream, we heard it at precisely 2. Therefore, the murderer struck, locked the door, and vanished. He moved to the desk, careful to avoid the blood. Papers lay scattered. Architectural plans of the manor, a ledger of debts, a crude map marked with crosses. The safe behind the tapestry stood open, empty. "Robbery?" Langford muttered. "Or the appearance of robbery," Poirot replied. He lifted the vellum note with tweezers from Thorne's bag. The handwriting, spidery, archaic, yet the ink is fresh from the bottle on the desk. Curious. Footsteps echoed in the corridor. Inspector Japp, summoned by telephone, arriving with 2 constables and the local surgeon. Japp's bulldog face was sour. "Poirot, you blessed nuisance. Can't a man enjoy a quiet pint without you dragging him to another locked room?" "Alas, Inspector, murder is inconsiderate of publicans' hours." While the police photographed and measured, Poirot requested the household assemble in the library. Dawn was still hours away. Gas lamps hissed, casting pools of sickly light across thousands of leather spines. A fire had been laid but not lit. The room smelled of dust and forgotten scholarship. Poirot took the central chair, arranging a small table before him like a magistrate. "Now, mesdames et messieurs, we begin. First, alibis. Captain Hastings and I were together when the scream sounded. Who else can account for their movements between 1 and 2? A nervous rustle. Geoffrey spoke first. "I was in my room, reading. Heard nothing until the scream. Alone? Yes." Clara's chin lifted. "I was with Geoffrey until 1:30. We quarrelled. I returned to my room. The maid can confirm. She was awake, pressing my gown." Lady Evelyn's voice was a thread. "I took a sleeping draught at midnight. Dr. Thorne prescribed it. I slept until the scream." Thorne nodded. "Digitalis and bromide. She would have been unconscious." Langford snorted. "I was in the billiard room, practicing shots. The butler brought me a whiskey at 1:15. Alone after that." Reverend Blackwood closed his Bible. "I was praying in the chapel. The verger locks it at 11. I have a key. I remained until the commotion." Poirot's gaze lingered on each face. "Bon. Now, motives. Sir Reginald spoke of financial ruin. Who benefits from his death?" Geoffrey flushed. "I inherit the estate, such as it is. But the debts which your fiancé's dowry would clear," Poirot finished gently. Clara paled. Langford cleared his throat. "Reginald and I were partners in a mining venture, Rhodesian gold. He threatened to expose irregularities, my ruin if he had lived." Lady Evelyn's fingers twisted her pearls. He changed his will last month. If he died before the diamonds were found, I receive nothing but a widow's jointure. Geoffrey gets everything." Thorne removed his spectacles, polishing them furiously. "Sir Reginald consulted me about angina. I warned him stress could kill him. He laughed, said the curse would get him first." The Reverend's voice was grave. "He planned to sell the East Meadow church land, granted by Henry VIII. I begged him to reconsider. He refused." Poirot steepled his fingers. "So, greed, fear, piety, love, hate, the classic ingredients." He rose. "But first, we must understand the curse itself. Reverend, you are the authority?" Blackwood opened his Bible to a pressed violet. "The legend is recorded in the parish registers. Lady Arabella Hargrove, 1618 to 1645. Royalist family, parliamentarian lover. Betrayed, she was bricked into the northwest turret with the diamonds, payment for Cromwell's troops. Her last words, according to the Mason's confession, 'Let every Hargrove who seeks my treasure die by steel and shadow.'" Clara shivered. I've heard her. 3 nights ago, moaning in the walls." "Wind in the chimneys," Geoffrey scoffed, but his voice lacked conviction. Poirot's eyes narrowed. "The northwest turret, above this very room?" He crossed to a window. Outside the turret loomed, blind windows staring like empty sockets. "And the secret chamber?" "Sealed since the Restoration," Blackwood said. "The entrance was concealed behind panelling. Sir Reginald believed he had located it behind the library chimney." Poirot turned sharply. "Show me." The chimney breast was ornate, carved with grotesque faces. Poirot pressed, prodded, listened. A hollow thud. "Ah! A false panel!" With Hastings's help, he swung it open. A narrow passage yawned, steps spiralling downward into darkness. Dust lay thick, cobwebs draped like funeral lace. "Recent disturbance," Poirot murmured, pointing to scuffed footprints in the grime. "A man's shoe, size 10, narrow heel, and here," he lifted a single auburn hair caught on a nail. Lady Evelyn touched her own hair, identical in shade. I sometimes walk the passages," she whispered. "To think, Reginald forbade it." Poirot's smile was gentle. "Of course, madame." Back in the library, he addressed the group. "The passage connects the study, the turret, and perhaps the mausoleum in the grounds. But it does not explain a locked door with the key inside." He produced a small lens, examining the key. No fingerprints, but Sir Reginald's. The murderer wore gloves, or wiped the key. Japp entered, wiping his hands. "No secret doors in the study itself, Poirot. Solid stone. But we found this." He held up a torn scrap of grey silk, snagged on the window bars outside. "Someone climbed the ivy?" "Possible," Poirot said, "but the bars are intact, and the drop is 30 feet to the terrace." Dawn finally bled across the sky, the colour of watered blood. The household dispersed, numb with shock and suspicion. Poirot lingered, studying the architectural plans. A cross marked the turret, another fainter, beneath the mausoleum. "Hastings," he said softly, "the curse is a mask. Beneath it lies greed, and greed, mon ami, always leaves footprints." Outside the magpie returned, 1 for sorrow, 2 for mirth. But at Shadowbrook Manor, mirth was in short supply. And there we pause, on the precipice of deeper shadows. Chapter 4 will see the net tighten, the red herrings multiply, and Poirot's little grey cells burn brighter than ever. Until then, this is Preston Flint, reminding you, in a house of secrets, even the walls have ears. Sleep well, if you can. Chapter 4. Shadows of Suspicion. Daylight came grudgingly, a thin, sour light that turned the manor's windows the colour of old pewter. In the breakfast room, silver chafing dishes stood untouched. The smell of congealing kedgeree hung like a reproach. The household gathered in silence, eyes ringed with sleepless violet. Inspector Japp had posted a constable at the study door. Another patrolled the corridor. The air tasted of cordite and fear. Poirot entered last, immaculate in a charcoal suit, Homburg hat in gloved hands. He surveyed the table with the air of a general reviewing battered troops. "Mes amis, we waste no time on pleasantries. The murderer is among us, or was. Let us walk the ground." He led them first to the terrace beneath the study windows. The ivy was thick, ancient, its trunks knotted like rope. Japp pointed to a patch of crushed leaves 20 feet up. "Someone climbed. We found fibres, grey silk, matching the scrap on the bars." Poirot knelt, brushing soil with a fingernail. The climber was light, no broken stems lower down, yet the study floor showed no mud. Curious, he straightened, and the bars bent outward, not inward, an exit, not an entry. Hastings frowned. Then the murderer left by the window, locked the door from outside somehow, and non, mon ami. The key is inside, the lock undisturbed. We return to the impossible. They moved to the mausoleum, a squat granite box half swallowed by yews. The iron gate creaked. Inside, mossy Hargrove effigies lay in eternal repose. Poirot's torch picked out fresh scuff marks on the floor, again the narrow size 10 print. A loose flagstone lifted to reveal a leather pouch. Inside, a single diamond the size of a hazelnut, and a folded note in the same spidery hand. One for the grave, the rest for the fire. Geoffrey snatched the gem. Father's salvation and his death warrant. Poirot reclaimed it. Or bait. Observe, the stone is flawless, but the cut is modern, not 17th century. A clever plant. Back in the library, Poirot spread the architectural plans across the table. The secret passage runs from study to turret to mausoleum. But between 1:30 and 2, every external door was bolted. Servant's testimony. The climber then came from within. He produced the auburn hair. Lady Evelyn, you admit walking the passages. Yet this hair is rooted, torn, not cut. A struggle? Her hand flew to her scalp. I brushed against a nail. Nothing more. Dr. Thorne cleared his throat. Sir Reginald kept digitalis in his desk, for his heart. One vial is missing. Enough to stop a horse. Langford's eyes narrowed. Poison, but the dagger. Insurance, Poirot said. If the heart failed first, the blade ensured silence. Clara Beaumont spoke for the first time, voice trembling. Geoffrey and I quarrelled at 1:30. He left my room in a temper. I heard him in the corridor, then footsteps descending the back stair. Geoffrey flushed crimson. I went for air. The side door was unbolted. I walked the garden, asked the gardener's boy. He saw me by the sundial at 10 to 2. The boy, summoned, confirmed it, shaking, cap in hand. Master Geoffrey, sir, pacing like a caged lion. Reverend Blackwood's knuckles whitened on his Bible. I left the chapel at 1:40. The passage door was ajar. Someone had passed through. Poirot's gaze flicked to Langford. And you, monsieur, in the billiard room? Langford shrugged. Alone, but the French window was open. I felt a draught, thought it was the wind. Poirot nodded slowly. 4 alibis, each with a crack. 4 motives, each with a blade. He turned to Japp. Inspector, search the bedrooms. Look for grey silk, climbing gloves, digitalis. The searches yielded fragments. A torn grey scarf in Clara's laundry basket. A pair of kid gloves, size small, in Geoffrey's drawer, one palm stained with verdigris from the ivy. A half-empty digitalis vial hidden behind theological tomes in the Reverend's study. And most damning, a blood-specked handkerchief, monogrammed VL, beneath Langford's mattress. Langford blanched. I cut myself shaving. At 2 in the morning, Japp growled, snapping cuffs. Poirot raised a hand. Patience, these are the red herrings that crowd the net. The true fish swims deeper. He led them to the northwest turret. The spiral stair was narrow, the air thick with dust and the faint sweetness of decay. At the top, a sealed door, bricked up, mortar fresh. Poirot scraped with a penknife. The brick was painted plasterboard. Behind, a small chamber, empty but for a child's wooden horse and a woman's grey veil stiff with age. The legendary hiding place, Poirot murmured. But the diamonds were removed long ago. The veil, Arabella's, or a prop? He lifted it. Beneath lay a modern brass key, identical to the study's. Hastings gasped. A duplicate! Precisely. The murderer entered the study openly, killed Sir Reginald, locked the door with this key, then departed via the passage, leaving the original key inside to create the impossibility. Geoffrey rounded on Langford. You had access to the estate keys. Langford sneered. and you had debts that would choke a shark." Lady Evelyn began to weep. Clara clutched Geoffrey's arm. The Reverend murmured Latin. Dr. Thorne stared at the veil as though it might speak. Poirot's voice cut through the chaos like a scalpel. "Enough! We have means, we have opportunity, but motive, that is the diamond we must yet unearth." He pocketed the duplicate key. "Tonight, we set a trap. The murderer believes the curse protects him. Let us give the Grey Lady a new haunting." As the sun climbed pale and cold, the net drew tighter. But the cleverest fish, mes amis, always waits for the darkest water. And there we leave them, poised on the edge of the abyss. Chapter 5 will bring the second death, the unravelling of alibis, and a twist that will make the manor itself shudder. Until then, this is Preston Flint, whispering from the shadows. Trust no one, not even the silence. Good day, or what passes for it, at Shadowbrook. Chapter 5 The Second Strike. Dusk bled violet across the lawns as the household gathered for a tense, early dinner. The dining room felt smaller, the chandelier's crystals trembling with every breath. Sir Reginald's chair stood empty, draped in black velvet like a throne awaiting a ghost. No one spoke of it, yet every glance slid toward the void. Poirot had spent the afternoon in the turret chamber, measuring, sketching, murmuring to himself in rapid French. Now he entered last, placing a small mahogany box on the table. "A gift from Scotland Yard," he announced. "Cyanide ampules, for rat control in the cellars, locked of course." He snapped the lid shut with a click that made Clara jump. Inspector Japp, stationed by the door, nodded grimly. "No one leaves the house. Constables at every exit." Dinner was a travesty. Consommé grown cold, lamb congealing in mint sauce. Dr. Thorne alone ate with mechanical precision, mopping gravy with bread. His left eye twitched faster than ever. At 9 o'clock the party adjourned to the drawing room. Rain lashed the windows. Thunder rolled like artillery over the downs. Poirot proposed a game of patience to soothe the nerves. Cards were dealt, but no one played. Geoffrey paced. Langford nursed a whisky, ice clinking. Lady Evelyn sat rigid, pearls clicking between her fingers. The Reverend read aloud from the Psalms, voice droning against the storm. At 10:30, Dr. Thorne excused himself. "My bag. I left digitalis in the study. Sir Reginald's supply must be accounted for." He lumbered out, medical bag swinging. Poirot's eyes followed him. "A moment, Doctor. The study is sealed." "Japp gave me the key," Thorne called over his shoulder, already in the corridor. 5 minutes later, a thud echoed, muffled, wet, final. Hastings leapt up. "That came from Thorne's room." They ran. The doctor's bedroom door stood ajar. Inside, Thorne lay sprawled across the counterpane, face congested purple, froth at the dew, lips. A teacup had shattered on the floor. Brown liquid seeped into the carpet. On the bedside table, a fresh curse note, ink still glistening. Japp knelt, sniffed the cup. "Almonds, cyanide," he rounded on the group clustered in the doorway. "Who brought him tea?" The maid, summoned trembling, swore she had left a tray outside his door at 10:15. Milk, 2 sugars as always. No one had seen it delivered inside. Poirot examined the body. Death within minutes. The cup was warm. He drank immediately. He lifted the shattered handle. A faint grey residue clung to the rim. Not from the kitchen pot. Added after. Another locked room. The door had been closed but not bolted. The windows latched from within. No passage entrance here. The plans showed none. Yet the tea had been poisoned inside the room, or en route by someone who then vanished. Panic erupted. Clara screamed that the curse was real. Geoffrey shouted for shotguns. Langford's revolver appeared again, shaking in his fist. Lady Evelyn fainted clean away. The Reverend caught her, murmuring about Satan's dominion. Poirot's voice cut through like a rapier. "Silence! 2 deaths, 2 impossible crimes, 2 notes in the same hand. The murderer accelerates. Why?" He turned to Jap. "Search again. Every pocket, every drawer, and the tea tray. Fingerprints." The search yielded horrors. In Geoffrey's room, a half-empty cyanide ampule hidden inside a boot. In Clara's jewel case, a grey veil, identical to the turret's. In the Reverend's Bible, a page torn out, Proverbs 6:16, 6 things the Lord hates. In Lady Evelyn's reticule, a duplicate study key, brass bright with recent use. Langford's handkerchief now bore fresh cyanose stains. Jap cuffed Geoffrey on the spot. "Enough evidence to hang you twice, lad." Geoffrey struggled. "I found the ampule in the cellar. Meant to tell you," Clara wept. "The veil is mine. I wore it for a masquerade in New York." The Reverend paled. "The missing verse. It was marked by Sir Reginald. He mocked me with it." Lady Evelyn, revived with sal volatile, whispered, "The key! I kept it for safety." Poirot raised both hands. "Stop! These are the false clues, planted with the precision of a stage magician. Observe, the ampule is cracked, useless for murder. The veil smells of camphor, not dust. The Bible page was torn with a ruler, too neat for passion. The key opens nothing. The wards are filed smooth." He strode to the window, flung it open. Rain swept in, cold and clean. "The murderer wishes us to chase shadows while he prepares the 3rd stroke, but Hercule Poirot sees the pattern." He faced them, eyes blazing. Both victims threatened the secret. Sir Reginald sought the diamonds. Dr. Thorne treated him, knew his heart, his fears, perhaps his confessions. The murderer eliminates witnesses. Hastings whispered, "Then who's next?" Poirot's smile was wintry. "The one who knows where the diamonds truly lie." Thunder crashed. Lights flickered. For one heartbeat, the room plunged into darkness. When the lamps steadied, the mahogany box on the sideboard stood open. The cyanide ampules were gone. Langford's revolver roared, wild, panicked. Plaster exploded from the ceiling. Jap tackled him, wresting the gun away. "You'll kill us all, you fool!" Poirot closed the box with deliberate calm. "Non, Inspector. The murderer does not need bullets. He has poison and time." He turned to the trembling group. "Tonight, no one sleeps alone. Pair yourselves. Constables will patrol. At dawn, we open the mausoleum fully. The diamonds and the truth lie buried there." Midnight tolled from the great hall. Somewhere in the walls, a woman's sob echoed, low and mournful. Clara crossed herself. Geoffrey reached for her hand, but she pulled away. Poirot stood at the window, watching moonlight fracture across the wet terrace. "The Grey Lady walks," he murmured, "but she is flesh and blood, and she is running out of night." And there we leave them, mes amis, trapped in a house where every heartbeat is a countdown. Chapter 6 will unveil the passage, the diamonds, and the first glimpse of the killer's face. Until then, this is Preston Flint, speaking from the storm. Lock your doors, check your tea, and trust no one. Good night, or what remains of it. Chapter 6. The revelation dawn found the household assembled in the mausoleum, coats buttoned to the throat, breath pluming in the crypt cold air. Torches cut white tunnels through the gloom. The effigies of dead Hargroves stared down with stone indifference. Inspector Japp had brought crowbars and a photographer. 2 constables stood guard at the iron gate. The storm had passed, leaving the world washed clean and mercilessly bright. Poirot carried the leather pouch from the previous day, the single modern diamond glinting like a false eye. "Today," he announced, We exhume the truth." The flagstone that had concealed the pouch lifted easily now. Beneath lay a rusted iron ring. Japp and Hastings heaved. A section of floor pivoted, revealing stone steps descending into blackness. The air that rose was fetid, sweet with decay and the metallic tang of old blood. "Torches," Poirot ordered, "and revolvers. The murderer may guard his treasure." They descended single file. The passage was narrow, walls sweating moisture, the ceiling so low that Langford's bowler scraped sparks. 20 feet down, the tunnel widened into a brick-vaulted chamber, no larger than a prison cell. In the centre stood a child's coffin, oak, brass-bound, the lid askew. Poirot lifted it. Inside lay not bones, but velvet sacks. He opened one. Diamonds, hundreds, flashing blue fire. Another held rubies the size of pigeon eggs. A third, emeralds dark as forest pools, the Hargrove fortune intact since 1645. Geoffrey exhaled a reverent curse. Clara's hand flew to her throat. Even Japp whistled. But Poirot's attention was on the coffin lid. Carved inside, faint but legible, SB 1887. "Not Arabella's," he said softly. "Replaced 50 years ago. The legend was a blind." He turned to the group. "The diamonds were found long ago, by someone in this house. Sir Reginald's search threatened exposure. Dr. Thorne's medical knowledge threatened blackmail. 2 murders to protect a secret half a century old." He knelt, torch beams sweeping the floor. The size 10 footprints ended here, overlaid by smaller prints, ladies' heels, sharp and recent. "Our murderer returned last night after planting the cyanide, but observe, he indicated scuffs near the wall. A panel, recently oiled." It swung open at a touch, revealing a second tunnel, newly brick-lined, leading upward. "This connects to the Reverend's private study," Poirot said, "built during restorations in 1887, by Silas Blackwood's grandfather, the vicar who discovered the curse legend. Reverend Blackwood went the colour of tallow. Coincidence? Non." Poirot produced the torn Bible page. "Proverbs 6:16, a lying tongue. Your grandfather lied. He found the jewels, hid them, and invented the Grey Lady to keep searchers away. You inherited the secret and the fear that Sir Reginald's demolition would expose it." He held up the modern diamond. "This was cut in Hatton Garden, 1924. You sold a few stones to pay gambling debts. Debts Sir Reginald discovered when he audited the Church Restoration Fund." Blackwood's Bible slipped from his fingers. I only meant to frighten him. The notes, the veil, fright became murder," Poirot continued. "You entered the study openly at 1:30, under pretext of spiritual counsel. Sir Reginald turned to the safe. You struck with the dagger. Then you locked the door with the duplicate key, exited via the passage, and planted the original key inside, through a slit in the panelling, later sealed with wax. The impossible crime." He turned to Thorne's death. "The doctor suspected. You brought him tea laced with cyanide from the cellar ampules, stolen earlier, cracks blamed on Geoffrey. You watched him drink, locked his door from outside with the skeleton key, and descended to the mausoleum to move the diamonds. But I anticipated. The tunnel was watched." Japp stepped forward, cuffs ready. Blackwood bolted, straight into Hastings's fist. The Reverend crumpled, sobbing. Poirot addressed the stunned assembly. The Grey Lady was always flesh. The moans, recordings on a gramophone hidden in the chapel organ. The apparition, Blackwood in his sister's grey cloak, projected by magic lantern through the stained glass window. The climbing ivy, a diversion, silk fibres planted by an accomplice, the maid paid to scream and scatter clues. Lady Evelyn gasped. "The maid, my confidant!" "Paid more by the Reverend," Poirot said gently. "She has confessed." He opened the final sack. Inside, not jewels, but ledgers, church accounts, forged entries, decades of embezzlement. The true curse of Shadowbrook, Poirot said, is greed wearing the mask of piety. Sunlight suddenly speared through the mausoleum door, gilding the diamonds into harmless glass. Geoffrey laughed, half hysteria, half relief. Clara wept into his shoulder. Langford pocketed his revolver, shamefaced. Lady Evelyn knelt by the coffin, tracing the carved date. Japp hauled Blackwood upright. "Silas Blackwood, I arrest you for the murders of Sir Reginald Hargrove and Dr. Elias Thorne." The Reverend's final words were a whisper. "Forgive me my trespasses." Poirot watched them ascend into daylight. The little grey cells, mes amis. They do not forgive, they merely explain. And there it is, the mask torn away, the curse laid bare as human frailty. Chapter 7 will bring justice, restitution, and the manor's first quiet sunrise in decades. Until then, this is Preston Flint, speaking from the cleansing light. The dead are avenged, the living are free, and the diamonds, well, they were always just stones. Good morning, wherever you are. Chapter 7 Justice Served. The village constable's Black Maria rattled up the gravel drive at 9 sharp, its bell clanging like a funeral knell in reverse. Reverend Silas Blackwood sat inside, wrists cuffed, clerical collar askew, staring at the floorboards as though they might open and swallow him. Japp followed in the rolls with Poirot and Hastings, the diamonds locked in a Scotland Yard evidence box on the seat between them. At the manor, the household had gathered in the great hall, servants included this time, for the truth belonged to everyone. Sunlight slanted through the stained glass martyr, painting the checkered floor in benevolent reds and golds. The black-draped chair had been removed. In its place stood a simple oak table bearing the forged ledgers, the gramophone cylinder, the grey veil, and the brass duplicate key. Silent witnesses now. Poirot took the centre, hands clasped behind his back. "Mesdames et messieurs, the play is ended. Let us draw the curtain with clarity and compassion." He began with the mechanics. The locked study. Blackwood entered at 1:20. Dagger hidden in his Bible. Sir Reginald turned to the safe. Blackwood struck. He locked the door with the duplicate, slid the original key back through a hairline gap in the panelling, later sealed with candle wax melted by the fire. The impossible crime was merely meticulous. Thorne's murder. The doctor confronted Blackwood in the corridor at 10:20, demanding a share of the diamonds to keep silent about the embezzlement. Blackwood offered tea, laced with cyanide from the cracked ampule. He watched Thorne drink, locked the bedroom door with the skeleton key from the chapel, and descended to the mausoleum to shift the jewels. But the constable on watch saw his lantern. The diversions. The gramophone in the organ loft played a recording of Blackwood's sister, her deathbed moans captured years earlier. The magic lantern apparition was projected from the chapel steeple onto the manor windows. The ivy fibres, the planted clues, all scattered by the maid Eliza, who has confessed and will be dealt with leniently. Lady Evelyn spoke first, voice steady. "How long, Reverend? How many generations did your family steal from mine?" Blackwood's answer was a whisper. "Since 1887. My grandfather found the chamber during repairs. He replaced the coffin, forged the legend, siphoned the sale of stones through church restorations. I inherited the duty and the terror." Geoffrey stepped forward, the modern diamond in his palm. "This stone paid your gambling debts at White's last Michaelmas. Father's audit uncovered it." Blackwood nodded, broken. "I warned him. He laughed. Said the curse was poppycock. I panicked." Poirot's tone softened. Panic is the seed of murder, but greed is the root. You killed 2 men to protect a lie older than your priesthood." Japp cleared his throat. "Silas Blackwood, you'll stand trial at the Old Bailey. Murder, theft, forgery. The maid Eliza Turner will be charged as accessory after the fact. The diamonds revert to the estate." Legal formalities followed swiftly. The Hargrove solicitor summoned by telegram confirmed the will. Geoffrey inherited debts to be paid from the jewels, a generous trust for Lady Evelyn, and a bequest to restore the church, minus the embezzled portions, which would be repaid from Blackwood's personal assets. The maid Eliza, tear-streaked, returned Lady Evelyn's missing pearl brooch, payment for her silence. "He said it was only to frighten the master, ma'am. I never thought—" "Enough," Lady Evelyn said gently. "You were a pawn. Go home to your mother." By noon the police were gone, the Black Maria a speck on the Salisbury Road. The household, now merely family and staff, gathered in the drawing-room. Tea was served properly this time, scones warm, clotted cream thick as Devon clouds. Poirot raised his cup. To truth, which is always simpler than fiction. Geoffrey laughed, the sound startlingly young, and to Poirot, who turned a curse into a fortune. Clara, eyes shining, slipped her hand into Geoffrey's. "We'll sell the London house, pay the debts, and open the manor to the village, fetes, concerts, a proper home again." Langford, shamefaced, returned the revolver to its case. "I'll settle my accounts with the estate. No more Rhodesian fantasies." Even the gargoyles seemed to smile as sunlight warmed the stone. Poirot and Hastings prepared to depart. The Rolls idled on the drive, the same chauffeur touching his cap. Lady Evelyn pressed a small velvet box into Poirot's hand. "For your trouble, monsieur. Inside, a single diamond, flawlessly cut, on a platinum chain. A token," she said, "from the new Hargrove Trust, the Poirot Fund for Logical Inquiry." Poirot bowed over her hand. "Madame, you honour me, but the greatest reward is order restored." At the door, Hastings paused. "The Grey Lady, will she walk again?" Poirot glanced back at the manor, ivy gleaming like washed copper. "Only in stories, mon ami, and stories, thank heaven, can be rewritten." The train north was quiet, the carriage empty save for the 2 friends. Poirot polished the diamond pendant with a silk handkerchief, then tucked it away. "A pretty bauble, Hastings, but the true jewel was the truth, small, hard, and infinitely precious." Hastings grinned. "Another case for the memoirs?" "Perhaps, though I think this one ends better in the telling than in the living." Outside, the Wiltshire Downs rolled away under a sky scrubbed clean. Shadowbrook Manor dwindled to a child's toy, then vanished around a bend. The curse was lifted, the diamonds catalogued, the murderer bound for justice. And somewhere in the village church, a new bell was already being cast, paid for by the Hargrove fortune, inscribed with a single line. Chapter 8. The Quiet After the Storm. 3 weeks later, on a flawless October morning, Hercule Poirot returned to Shadowbrook unannounced. The Rolls purred up the drive. The gargoyles wore crowns of late roses. A new sign at the gate read, in fresh gilt, "Hargrove Manor, open for village fete, Saturdays." Geoffrey met him on the steps, sleeves rolled, hair tousled, grinning like a schoolboy. "Poirot, you've come for the unveiling?" "Curiosity, mon ami, and a promise to inspect the new bell." Inside, the hall smelled of beeswax and fresh paint. The stained glass martyr had been repaired. St. Sebastian's arrows now glinted like harmless sunbeams. Servants bustled with trestle tables and bunting. Lady Evelyn, in dove-grey linen, directed flower arrangements with the calm authority of a duchess reborn. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, kissing his cheeks, "you gave us back our home." He bowed. I merely removed the rot, madame. You rebuilt." Clara appeared, radiant, a modest bump beneath her apron. "The trust is solvent, debts paid, church restored, village school endowed, and," she lowered her voice, "the nursery is being prepared." Poirot's eyes twinkled. "A new Hargrove. May he inherit only the sunlight." They walked the grounds. The maze had been trimmed into a playful labyrinth for children. The mausoleum gate stood open, the crypt now a wine cellar, diamonds replaced by dusty bottles of '07 claret. The Grey Lady's turret had become a dovecote. White wings flashed against the sky. In the library, the false panel was gone, replaced by glass doors opening onto a terrace. The architectural plans now framed the wall, annotated in Geoffrey's hand. Secrets exposed, lessons learned. Poirot ran a finger along the spines. The books breathe easier without their poison. A clatter of hooves announced Victor Langford, arriving in a pony trap laden with ledgers. "Clean slate, Poirot. Every penny accounted. Thought I'd deliver them myself. Penance." He doffed his bowler, sheepish. Rhodesian shares were a fantasy, real gold's in honesty. At noon the village arrived en masse. Farmers in Sunday suits, children with jam smears, the brass band wheezing greensleeves. Tea and seed cake were dispensed on the lawn. A maypole rose where the sundial had once marked Geoffrey's desperate pacing. The new bell hung in the church tower, gleaming bronze. The vicar, young, earnest, untainted by his predecessor's sins, invited Poirot to pull the rope. The first peal rolled across the downs, pure and unafraid. Inscribed beneath the rim, "In memory of truth unearthed. H. Poirot, 1925. Poirot stepped back, hands clasped. A fitting epitaph, for the case, if not the man. After the fete, the family gathered in the drawing room for a private toast. Geoffrey produced a dusty bottle. Father's last acquisition, 1921 Chateau d'Yquem. He never opened it. Said it was for a celebration worth the vintage. Glasses chimed. Lady Evelyn raised hers. To absent friends, and to the friend who brought us home. Poirot sipped, eyes half closed. Liquid sunlight, like the manor itself now. Clara produced a small parcel. From the village children. Inside, a hand-painted card, wobbly crayoned letters. Thank you, Mr. Poirot, for making the ghost go away. Poirot tucked it into his breast pocket, beside the diamond pendant. The greatest reward! Twilight settled, rose and lavender. The family walked Poirot to the rolls. Hastings, who had been cataloguing the library, joined them, arms full of first editions Geoffrey insisted he accept. At the gate, Lady Evelyn pressed a final gift into Poirot's hand, an antique pocket watch, the back engraved, Time Reveals All, E.H. He wound it gently. A reminder, madame, that even the longest night ends. The rolls pulled away. In the rearview mirror, Shadowbrook shrank to a glowing window, then a spark, then memory. Poirot opened the watch. The second hand swept forward with serene precision. Hastings yawned. Home to London, then. Mrs. Oliver wants her Egyptian mummy story polished. Poirot smiled at the darkening sky. In a moment, mon ami. First, let us savour the quiet. They stopped at a hilltop overlooking the valley. Below, the manor's windows kindled one by one. Lamplight, not curse-light. Somewhere a child laughed, a dog barked, the new bell gave a single contented chime. Poirot closed the watch. You see, Hastings, the greatest mysteries are not solved by brilliance alone, but by restoring what was broken. The diamonds were never the treasure. The treasure was trust, between father and son, husband and wife, village and manor. Hastings nodded, unusually solemn. And the Grey Lady? Poirot gestured to the darkening sky, where the first star pricked through. She walks no more. She was always only fear wearing a woman's face. Fear banished by daylight. The engine purred to life. London's lights lay far ahead, but for one suspended moment the two friends sat in companionable silence, listening to the countryside settle into honest night. Poirot spoke softly, almost to himself. "Order and method, Hastings. They conquer even ghosts." The Rolls crested the hill and descended toward the future, leaving Shadowbrook Manor behind, no longer ancient, no longer cursed, but simply home. And there, mes amis, the story truly ends, not with a bang, but with the gentle tick of a watch and the promise of morning. If you've journeyed with me from scream to sunrise, thank you. Tell me in the comments your favorite moment, your wildest theory, or simply where you'll carry this tale next. Until the next locked door swings open, this is Preston Flint, signing off from Poirot Stories with a heart full and a cup empty. The little grey cells rest, the diamonds sleep in their vault, and somewhere a new bell rings for truth. Good night, good day, and good mysteries always. Chapter 9. The Deeper Shadow. It was mid-afternoon on the day of the village fete, when Hercule Poirot's train pulled into Salisbury once more. The October sun beat down with unseasonal warmth, turning the Wiltshire Downs to a golden haze. Yet Poirot's face, as he stepped onto the platform, was etched with uncharacteristic gravity. The diamond pendant from Lady Evelyn weighed heavy in his waistcoat pocket, not a bauble of triumph, but a reminder of oversight. "Mon Dieu, Hastings," he murmured to his companion, who had been summoned by urgent wire. "The little grey cells, they do not rest." A telegram from Inspector Japp. The maid Eliza. She retracts her confession. The gramophone cylinder, missing from evidence, and the diamonds, one is flawed, a forgery undetected in the rush. Hastings frowned, hailing a taxi. But Blackwood confessed. The trial is set for next week. Confessions, mon ami, can be coerced by fear, or by a cleverer hand. Poirot tapped his temple. "We return to Shadowbrook. The curse, it seems, has one final breath." The manor gates stood open, laughter spilling from the lawns where children dodged maypole ribbons. But inside, the air was thick with unease. Geoffrey met them in the hall, face pale beneath his tan. "Poirot! Thank God! Eliza vanished last night, left a note saying Blackwood was innocent, that she'd lied to protect someone, and the safe, it's been tampered with again." Lady Evelyn joined them, eyes shadowed, the village whispers of the curse returning, a grey figure seen at the turret window this morning. Poirot's moustache quivered. "Superstition reborn! Led me to the library." The room had changed little. Books neatly shelved, terrace doors ajar to the breeze. But Poirot's keen eye caught the anomaly, a single volume askew, The Antiquary's Guide to Wiltshire Secrets, spine creased as if recently consulted. He pulled it down. Inside, a hollowed-out cavity held a folded letter, yellowed with age. "Voila!" Poirot exclaimed, unfolding it. The script was feminine, elegant. "Dearest Reginald, the diamonds are safer with me than in stone. Forgive the deception. Evelyn, 1915. Hastings gasped. "Lady Evelyn?" She entered then, tray in hand, tea things rattling. "Monsieur Poirot, another visit so soon?" Poirot bowed, but his eyes were steel. "Madame, a question. In 1915, during the Great War, where were you?" Her hand trembled, spilling milk. "In London, nursing. Why?" "No. Records from the War Office. Your nursing was a cover. You were here at Shadowbrook, as governess to young Geoffrey, and you discovered the chamber first." Lady Evelyn set down the tray, composure cracking. "How? The hair in the passage, auburn-rooted, from 1925. No, madame. It was yours from a decade ago, preserved in the veil's lining. The modern diamond, cut in 1916 to fund your rise from servant to wife. Sir Reginald married you for love, but you wed for the fortune hidden in plain sight." Geoffrey staggered. "Mother, you knew?" She sank into a chair, years peeling away like gilt from old frames. "Yes, my son. I found the chamber as a girl, during a storm, sheltering in the mausoleum. The diamonds were there, untouched since Arabella. I took a handful, sold them discreetly, bought my way into society. Reginald proposed. I accepted. But when he began searching last month, threatening to expose the empty coffin, I feared." Poirot nodded gravely. "And Dr. Thorne? He treated you for nerves, knew your secret from a wartime consultation." "He blackmailed me," she whispered, "demanded half the remaining stones. The cyanide was meant for his cup, but Blackwood drank it by mistake. No, the Reverend was my pawn. I confessed the plot to him in the chapel. He agreed to stage the curse, plant the clues, take the blame, for a share. But when Thorne died, Silas panicked, tried to flee with the ledgers. I had to silence him too. But wait, no, Thorne was the second victim." The room spun with revelations. Poirot pieced it aloud, his voice a metronome of logic. "The first murder. You entered Reginald's study as his wife. No need for locks or passages. A lover's quarrel turned fatal. The dagger from the wall, the note forged in Blackwood's hand. You left via the door, key inside as planned, then summoned the household with your scream, disguised as distant thunder on the gramophone. Thorne's death. You poisoned the tea in his room while he fetched his bag, using the digitalis vial you'd hidden. Locked from outside with your duplicate, descended the passage to plant the note. Blackwood provided the cyanide ampules, believing it a bluff. But the ivy fibres, the silk scrap, Hastings pressed. A red herring from my old nursing uniform, grey torn deliberately. The footprints, yours in heeled boots, size 10 narrow, borrowed from the costume trunk for the apparition. The maid Eliza, bribed with pearls to scream and scatter clues, then coerced into the false confession to shield Blackwood temporarily. Geoffrey's voice broke. "And father, you killed him, for the diamonds?" Tears traced her cheeks. "No, Geoffrey, for love twisted by greed. He discovered my past, threatened divorce. The curse was our family's lie. My grandfather the mason who walled Arabella, but I made it real to protect what I'd built. Blackwood was complicit, but innocent of blood. I struck alone." Japp burst in then, tipped by Poirot's wire. Constables at his heels. "Lady Evelyn Hargrove, you're under arrest for the murders of Sir Reginald Hargrove and Dr. Elias Thorne, and conspiracy with Reverend Blackwood." She rose, regal even in ruin. "The Grey Lady claims her own, inspectors. Lock me away. The manor will whisper my name now." As cuffs clicked, Poirot turned to Geoffrey and Clara. "The diamonds, half to the estate, half to restitution for the church, and the true treasure, truth, at last." Clara embraced Geoffrey. He nodded numbly. "We'll rebuild, Poirot, without shadows." The Black Maria departed at dusk, Lady Evelyn's silhouette fading into twilight. Blackwood, released from preliminary custody, would face lesser charges, accessory, fraud. The curse, revealed as a century-spanning web of avarice, dissolved like mist in morning sun. Poirot lingered on the terrace, watching stars prick the sky. "Hastings, the human heart, it is the greatest locked room of all. And there we stand, mes amis, on the threshold of final closure, with one more chapter to tie the threads. Chapter 10 will dawn with justice tempered by mercy, and Shadowbrook's true rebirth. Until then, this is Preston Flint, reminding you, even queens can fall, and detectives must always look twice. Good evening, wherever the light fades. Chapter 10. Dawn of a New Manor. The trial lasted 3 days at the Wiltshire Assizes. Lady Evelyn Hargrove, once mistress of Shadowbrook, now prisoner 217, stood in the dock with the same porcelain composure that had once commanded drawing rooms. The prosecution laid out the murders in clinical detail. The dagger, the cyanide, the forged notes, the gramophone moans. Reverend Blackwood, pale but unshackled, testified against her. Accessory, not killer. The jury took 43 minutes to return. Guilty. Sentence: transportation for life to Holloway, then a women's penal colony in Van Diemen's Land. No appeal. The diamonds, valued at $180,000, were forfeit to the Crown, with half awarded to the Hargrove estate and half to the church commissioners for restitution. Blackwood received 7 years for fraud and conspiracy. The maid Eliza, 3 months already served. On the morning after sentencing, Poirot returned one last time. The manor gates bore a new plaque, modest, brass, Hargrove Manor, a home for all, 1926. Geoffrey and Clara greeted him on the steps, arms linked, faces older but luminous. "Poirot," Geoffrey said, voice steady. "We've renamed the East Wing the Evelyn Library. Ironic, perhaps, but she did love books. The village children will read there." Clara added, "And the Grey Lady's turret is now the nursery. No ghosts allowed." They walked him through the changes. The mausoleum had become a museum of local history. Arabella's true story told on a brass plate. Betrayed, not cursed. Remembered, not feared. The secret passage was bricked up, a single pane of glass set into the wall so visitors could peer into the past without entering it. The dagger from Lepanto hung in a locked case labelled Instrument of Greed, 1925. In the Great Hall, the stained glass martyr had been replaced by a clear window. Sunlight poured in, unfiltered, warming the checkered floor. A new portrait hung above the fireplace. Sir Reginald, painted from a photograph, eyes kind, hand resting on Geoffrey's boyhood shoulder. Beneath, in Clara's neat script, "Forgiven." Poirot paused before it. "A wise choice, mon ami. Memory without bitterness is the rarest diamond." Tea was served on the terrace. Seed cake, Victoria sponge, Darjeeling in porcelain so thin it glowed. Victor Langford arrived, bowler in hand, to sign final papers. "Debts cleared, Poirot. I'm staying on as estate manager. Honest work for once." He produced a cheque for the Church Restoration Fund, signed with a flourish. The village bell rang 3 clear notes. Practice for Sunday. Children's laughter drifted from the maze. A pair of white doves wheeled from the turret, flashing against the sky. Poirot set down his cup. "And the pendant, Madame Clara." She smiled, touching her throat. "Reset into a christening cross for our child. The stone that began in blood ends in blessing." Hastings, who had been cataloguing the library one final time, joined them with a small parcel. "First editions for your nursery shelves, Geoffrey. Treasure Island, The Wind in the Willows, stories of adventure, not avarice." Geoffrey clasped his hand. "Stay for the dedication?" Poirot shook his head gently. "I am needed in London. Mrs. Oliver's mummy refuses to stay wrapped. But first—" He drew from his pocket the antique watch Lady Evelyn had given him. The engraving, "Time Reveals All," caught the light. He wound it once, then pressed it into Geoffrey's palm. "For the child," he said, "let it teach him that every second is a chance to choose differently." The rolls waited, engine purring. At the gate, the entire household assembled. Cook, butler, gardeners, even the stable boy who had once seen Geoffrey pacing at the sundial. They raised a cheer as Poirot climbed in. Clara tossed a handful of rose petals. They fluttered like confetti across the gravel. The car crested the hill. In the mirror, Shadowbrook dwindled, first a manor, then a toy, then a memory gilded by afternoon. Poirot opened the watch. The second hand swept forward with serene precision. Hastings leaned back. Case closed, then. No loose ends. Poirot's eyes twinkled. On the contrary, mon ami. The best cases leave one loose end. Hope. They descended toward London, the downs rolling away like a green sea. Somewhere behind them, a new bell was being cast. Smaller, brighter, inscribed simply, Truth Heals. That evening, in Whitehaven Mansions, Poirot arranged his evening cocoa with ritual care. Hastings sprawled with the Times, headlines screaming, Manor Curse Laid Bare, Belgian Detective Triumphs. Poirot permitted himself a small smile. They always exaggerate, Hastings. It was not triumph. It was merely tidying. He placed the christening cross diamond on the mantel beside a sprig of dried lavender from Shadowbrook's garden. Outside, London's lights flickered on, one by one, honest and unashamed. Tomorrow, Poirot murmured, another puzzle. But tonight, the manor sleeps in sunlight, and the Grey Lady is only a story grandmothers tell to warn against greed. He raised his cup in silent toast. To order restored, to second chances, and to the little grey cells, may they never grow complacent. The watch on the table ticked once, twice, then settled into the quiet rhythm of a house at peace. And there, mes amis, the curtain truly falls. No encores, no postscripts, only the gentle certainty that some stories end exactly where they should, in light, in laughter, and in the promise of a new day. If you've walked every shadowed corridor with me, thank you. Tell me in the comments your favourite clue, your wildest guess, or simply where you'll carry Shadowbrook in your heart. Until the next impossible crime beckons, this is Preston Flint, signing off from Poirot Stories with a manor reborn, a detective content, and a world a fraction tidier than we found it. The little grey cells are at rest, the diamonds sleep in their new settings, and somewhere a child will grow up knowing that curses are only choices unmade. Good night, good day, and good mysteries forever.